Greetings. This is Peter Macon, also known as Lieutenant Commander Bortus of the USS Orville, and you are now listening to Flashback.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Flashback with Wes Britton. And I'm going to have a lot of fun tonight, I can tell you. But first, I want to tell you about a convention this weekend. It's called Shore Leave. It's taking place at the Delta Hotel in Hunt Valley, Maryland. And if you're into science fiction, Star Trek, the Orville, golly, I've forgotten what all. There's a number of actors from different shows going to be there, from Voyager, from the Orville. But that's this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And someone who's participating can tell you a bit more about it. And that's Peter Macon from the Orville. And I don't know, do I dare say Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes yet?
You will be silent. No. We can talk about that later.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, sure, you could say that. Of course, you could say Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes because that's Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes because that's about a year out. But yeah, that's coming.
That's coming. Well, it's nice to talk about coming attractions. Well, speaking about your career, obviously you didn't come to the Orville without a nice, impressive resume. Share with the folks some of the roles that you had over the years.
Graduated from the School of Hard Knocks. No, but a long, I don't know, prolific. I was where I was working and started working professionally. I got my equity card when I was 17 years old when I got out of high school. But yeah, so and after I got out of Yale, I continued to work some in New York and on Broadway, and then more regional theaters around the country, and then wound up at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which is in Ashland, Oregon, and that's a 90-year-old Shakespeare festival. It's the oldest Shakespeare festival in the Western Hemisphere.
Is that where you did Othello?
For the first time, yeah. So yeah, I had a great run there. Had a really great run with Macbeth. We did I think it was 150 performances from February to November, and that was a blast. I think that's the most fun I've ever had on doing a show, and that was like I think I've done Macbeth 7 times, but I've played Macbeth twice. That was the second time I played Macbeth. First time when I was like 25, going to art school in San Francisco and had no idea what I was doing. And, I thought, of course, I was going to be fired, but I wasn't, and I figured it out. You just kind of have to breathe. So, yeah, kind of bounced around quite a bit around the country, a little bit of international travel. And I think, so I played Othello 4 times, which is 4 times too many, but and so my last actual time on stage was in Dublin in Ireland at the Abbey Theatre, the National Theatre of Ireland. I was invited to come and play Othello there. And then when I got back to the States, when that was done, then my TV career kind of started to pick up, and of course, some guest stars on Supernatural, Shameless, Bosch, God, what else? Law and Order. Those are but one fun guest star, which was a short-lived show with they made a TV series of Minority Report, that Tom Cruise film, and that was a fun series, so I did a little of that.
I remember the film. I never knew they did a series.
Yeah, well, it was short-lived, but that was an interesting concept, for sci-fi fans.
Yeah.
Just sort of further explored the world, sort of gritty, like almost comic book style, just not quite dystopian, but no one's really happy. But trying to think. So that happened, and then Shameless, and then I did a couple of pilots in Toronto. So the TV was kind of working. and then it got a little dry. And But then I got a call from my manager to come and audition for this new Seth MacFarlane project. And at the time, I had a job. I was supposed to go to Botswana to do another science fiction show for Amazon, which I don't even think got made, but I don't know that it saw the light of day. And I told my manager, look, I already have a job. I don't want to lose this job. And she's like, no, just go and audition. Because they were searching high and low, apparently. This is what Seth tells me, that they auditioned about 100 people for Lieutenant Commander Bortus from New York,
What
London.
was that?
Hmm?
What was that? What made him so challenging?
Because he's very particular and
Yeah.
he's very specific about, because he's an illustrator, right? I think he started as an illustrator when he went to the Rhode Island School of Design, and then the voice acting, and so the combination of being a cartoonist and he's a serious crooner too, like a serious sort of rat packy kind of
Ring
um,
music.
swing, but swing circa old Blue Eyes, and like that sort of uh, that kind of a vibe style of jazz. But and he writes music, he plays music, you know, and so he's kind of, so he's a wordsmith too. So he's an incredible writer. He's very well read. So he's a super smart guy, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, he's really like a Renaissance man.
Renaissance man. That was the phrase I was expecting.
Yeah, or jack of all trades, master of nothing. But like no, but like he's
I
a
don't know
serious,
about that.
yeah, right. He's a serious Renaissance guy, and so I think that you know the scripts that we were working with were almost like a score. You know what I mean? So I mean, I think that we didn't do. I think there was, I would say, 99.9% of all of what was filmed was scripted. There was not a lot of improv, like maybe a word here or there, but he's a wordsmith, right? So so it was great. It was great. So like I think that that's why his search was so wide, because he wanted to get what he heard in his head. And I think that the character description of Bortus, if I remember correctly, it was like someone like the size and build of Dwayne Johnson, but looks like the Thing from Fantastic Four. Do you know what I mean? So, but but that's a sort of a rough, character breakdown. And I'm like, well, I'm not the size of Dwayne Johnson, and I certainly don't look like, like the
And
Thing.
Grim.
But the prosthetics, like I spent a great deal of time, 2 years in grad school, studying clown and commedia dell'arte style of physical movement, and I think that that lent itself a great deal to eventually the playing of Bortus. But like I think certainly like the audition, because I always think of Bortus as a character that if Sam the Eagle and Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh had a love child, it would be Bortus. And I
It'll never work.
yeah, right, right. So just super dry, a little bit of Stephen Wright peppered in there.
Uh-huh.
Like very dry. So but the comedy is math a lot of times, right? So understanding, I kind of thought of the crew of the Orville as kind of like this kind of band, from the Muppet Show, maybe like a band where like, everybody has their notes to play. And Bortus was like, the cello and a timpani and a, like a double bass, and then like where Gordon is kind of like a piccolo or like or like I mean, but the characterizations of different instruments, but for the comedy and for the funny, you know what I mean? It's like being the butt of a lot of jokes, but not being aware of being the butt of the jokes, which is which is what makes it funny. So um, I remember when I auditioned for Bortus, it was a scene where uh, Bortus asks Captain Mercer for paternity leave because he's going to lay an egg, and that's in itself is funny enough. But and Mercer asks Bortus about the size of the eggs, and like it's on everyone's mind. Where does the egg come out? So like you want to, but and I thought, okay, well that everyone knows that's funny. But maybe, and so Mercer asked Bortus if the eggs are large, and Bortus says they are quite large, and I thought, my take was to try to put a little bit of funny and a little bit of commentary, because I know that what everyone's thinking, and make a little bit of a commentary on the size of the egg, and Seth being so just in tune with the subtle, right? Like he's like, it's funnier if you don't make a comment on it at all, because that was Peter Macon, the actor, making it like thinking that so Bortus is not self-conscious at all. Do you know what I mean? And so like that little bit of an inflection alluded to a level of self-consciousness that would take away the funny. This is what I mean. It's mathematics. It's very, it's very layered, and you have to be very cognizant of 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 all of the inflections and the timing. And he's completely aware of, because this is what he hears in his head. So he's complete. So he gave me that adjustment in the audition, and I guess I nailed it because I got the job. But like it was such a great little gift for actors, because we go in, we audition, and most of the time we hear thank you very much, and that's it. But it was nice to get a little bit of just a little tinkering with what I was doing, so that I could make an adjustment, and it worked. So that's what I mean. He's aware of all of these things when in the writing. You know what I mean? So all I have to do is just be in the makeup and say the words, pretty much. I mean, no, I kid, but it's that much, that level of thought that has to go into the creating of something we've never seen before, which was like you know a heavy load, to create a palpable and believable three-dimensional alien species that um, in a quasi comedy. So when do aliens get to be funny and not just spoofed? Because the show walks the line between comedy and drama, and it's something that my clown professor you know stated over and over again at Yale, was that without the possibility of tragedy, comedy can't exist. So um, that's all of that is going into the soup of creating a character, a well written character, well thought about character, and then it's just my job to three dimensionalize the character, and you know uh, yeah, I mean, and it was a really great time, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully doing more episodes.
A fourth season?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, I know there was talk about it before you know the strikes started to happen,
Yeah.
and I know that Seth wants to do some more. So I think that there's more story to be told, and some fans seem to really respond to it. I mean, I do a bunch of conventions, and people are
I
like,
was
"When's
going
the
to
fourth
ask you
season?"
about that. Do you
Yeah.
do a lot of conventions? What do you think of the fans?
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's the only time that I get to not only thank people for keeping me employed, but to put a face to the masses. You know what I mean? I meet people, I remember faces, and it's just really nice to have, and usually it's like a 1 or 2 3 minute interaction.
Is
Um,
that
and then sometimes it's 10 15 minutes, because I like to just talk to people, and you know, we try to treat everyone, give everyone the same amount of attention and time, because they're standing in line and wanting to talk to me, and I'm really grateful for that. But more than anything, it's really cool to talk to people individually, and not only thank them, as I said, but to meet them, and get to know I mean, fan base is like such a generic way to put it, but just get to know people who are out there who support what we're doing, and it's a good time, you know. I'm usually pretty hoarse afterwards because I'm just blabbing and blabbing and blabbing for 8-10 hours a day for a couple days in a row. But yeah, I mean, and that's the only shot that we get to meet. Do you know what I mean? And I think
Yes.
that's I think it's important, or I mean, it's certainly very cool because that's the only avenue that we get to interact like that. You know what I mean? And talk to each other, and and so usually when we have panels with the other members of the cast, it's complete shenanigans, and people get a show, because
Yeah.
we're hungry to work with each other again. So there's a lot of riffing and a lot of spontaneity and just a lot of hijinks, and we have a good time. So yeah, like there's the shore leave is coming up, and then I think we're at the Star Trek convention in Vegas, and then there's
A
the
big one.
Dragon Con in Atlanta, which is it's insane. That's a lot of fun. It's a big one. So yeah, there's a few, and we just did this new one called Gaze in Space, which was in Philadelphia. I've done one in Ireland, in Dublin, and then of course the San Diego Comic Con. But yeah, conventions are something else. You know what I mean? Because I mean, you think about conventions, right? Like I think my first uh, uh, idea, or even hearing about a convention, was watching um, the Flintstones, and like and you go to the conventions with the grand poobahs, and they had like the big fez hats on, and I was
The
like,
Fez hats. Yeah, I remember
what are
those.
they
Yeah.
doing? What is this about? So and that's, if you cut to, like, say, shore leave, and you have people walking around in cosplay, which is
Yeah.
amazing. And like these are people's vacations, I mean, people stay
Yes.
and they do this, and it's such a unique avenue for sci-fi fans, or for fantasy fans, or people, comic book fans, or whatever fan, and
All
people,
of the above. Yeah.
all of that, so the smorgasbord of just, high brainy debauchery. You know what I mean? So it's a good time, and like I said, it's just great to just sort of connect with people who appreciate what we're doing.
Well, I happen to know 4 or 5 people who are also going to be at Hunt Valley, because I've met with them. We have our monthly Star Trek meeting,
Yeah.
and I told them I was going to be interviewing you, and I asked them if there's any questions anybody had. They wanted to make sure I
Or-
asked. And the big one was the makeup.
yeah.
I'm sure you get asked about that all the time, but I guess they want to know the process and how it feels and
Well, I mean,
anything you want to say about it.
it's a whole there's a whole lot to say about it. um I will say I love it. And just, like the clown in me, like I love Halloween, and I love, dressing up, and I always have. And I so like, and to create the character, like, it was completely liberating, because it wasn't my face, or it's not my face, because I look in the mirror when I put the makeup on, and I can't see myself in it at all, which is hilarious. And so it's completely liberating, and then it's not without its parameters in terms of the specific movement. I can only turn my head probably 30 degrees. Mm, yeah, I'd say 45 degrees out of. So if you turn your head to your left, what is that? 45 degrees, like,
About yeah.
yeah, and you turn it the other. So I could only go maybe 20, 25 degrees each way. So how that makes for the funny is the no neck turn, right? So like the no neck turn is when you have to rotate your whole shoulder to look over, and it's a lot funnier than turning your head. And so so the basis of, again, like, I'll just call it the funny, um like the physical expression. So when, like in the deadpan, so if you layer, okay, so then there's layers, right? So you have the fact that, like, I have a limited range of motion, and so you could also say that he has a limited range of human humor, right? And then I have a limited range, and so then I can also only hear a lot, lose about 40, 30 to 40% of my hearing, because Bortus's ears are in front of my ears. And so they had to, so there was a process of channeling out the foam rubber so that, like, I could have an ear hole, because at first I couldn't hear anything. Um, and but that's also funny because I had to learn how to read lips. And I think that that's a funny thing, and an interesting character choice, that and it's all about, as an actor, it's about imagination. It's about building, imaginary circumstances and three-dimensionalizing a character. So I understood that English was not is not Bortus's first language. So I'm like, well, he probably had to learn how to read lips, which Peter had to learn how to read lips, so I can make sure I get my cues, which makes it for funny, because I mean, because it's real. You know what I mean? It's not something that's put on. Um, so that's one. That's something. Like I said, there's a lot to talk about. It took about 3 different sessions of molding and casting and body casting to get the foundation for the makeup application. And then it took initially about 4 hours to apply. And then we eventually got it down. The makeup artist got it down to 90 minutes of application. So I would get to set, or get to do the lot at 6 o'clock in the morning. Um, and then I'd get in the chair and fall asleep. And then I wake up uh, transformed. And that's usually what happens when you fall asleep in a makeup trailer. Just word to the wise. Um, but and so then there's that, and then there's also I would get incredibly hot in the makeup, because there's no place for the heat to escape. Like, and if you have no hair, like I have no hair, that's 40% of your body heat gone, that you said. So you put a hat on and you restore 40% of your body heat. So with the Bortus's head, I would say that got tripled in terms of the amount of body heat that was retained in my head. So and it's glued to my skin, so I can't take it off. So I would have to maintain a very even keel. I mean, a very non-wrinkled ire, a very cool disposition, because the moment and I don't know if this is psychosomatic, or if there's something, I'm still, interested in the research, but of what happens when your skin because the skin is the largest organ that we have, right? So and then it's reacting to chemicals, and it's reacting to being overheated, and and so then does it affect your nervous system? And I'll give you like a small example of what I mean by how this could do. So I used to live in Ghana, West Africa, and I got malaria, right? And malaria, um, depending on how bad you get it, which there's no malaria light, but it affects your central nervous system. So when I encounter mosquitoes, my whole body goes into this sort of PTSD, nervous stasis, where, like, like sometimes I develop a tic, or so I ask these questions about, with this makeup, and like your skin, and your head, in particular, where it's, like, the most of your body heat comes a lot from your head. And when that's compromised in some specific way, for 5 years, um if did it does it have psychological effects? And I know for a fact that when I got hot, when we shot outside, I would have to turn into the most Zen Buddha monk, where nothing bothered me. I didn't get upset about, like things running behind schedule, or upset about anything. I just had to maintain like a very, you know, calm, even, and just a state of being. Because when I would get agitated, when I would get upset, when I would get, my ire would get wrinkled, I would start to itch in this weird way that it felt like there were electrical currents running across my face, on my neck. You know what I mean? And I don't, and I would talk with this about the makeup artist, and the only thing that we could do was to keep me cool, and like, I mean, cool physically, and keep my chi cool. You know what I mean? Because to keep that from happening, because without fail, anytime I would get upset, I would get like these weird currents, and it felt like itching. And then, and another traumatizing story is that there was one summer we were shooting in Los Angeles, I think in June. There's like this, I don't know how it works, but I think it's just in the cycle of life with these ants, right? Like Los Angeles gets inundated with, like, everyone gets ants, right? And so I had ants in my trailer, and so they would, on lunch breaks, they would split my head, the prosthetic open, and it looked a lot like one of those like those where the face huggers come out of from Alien. It looked like, like they split my head open, and put popsicle sticks, and so the heat can escape, off of my brain. And I would go sit in my air conditioned trailer and just sort of take a nap or whatever, and took a nap, and they came and got me after lunch break, and went back to set, and they closed me up. And about 2-3 minutes after they closed me up, I start to feel like
Yeah.
little, like, and it turns out ants had crawled into the makeup, and they glued them inside, and I couldn't scratch, couldn't itch, and so I was literally punching myself in the face, and banging my head on the wall. And like, they were like, what the hell is wrong with him? And I'm like, I have ants in my head, I have ants in my head. And so that was
Oh my gosh.
ridiculously traumatizing.
Wow.
So then that added to the whole psychosomatic, torture of keeping my cool.
Before we leave, we've got to let Karina see if she's got any questions for you.
Okay, so my first question is, why haven't you been a superhero yet? You would make the ideal superhero in a TV series.
Listen, you can write your congresswoman, write your congressman. We could start a petition. I'm happy to lead the way.
So
It
you
is
do
out of
it if
it's
it
out
was
of my
offered
head.
to you, yeah?
Of course I would, 100%. Like,
Yeah.
Sam Jackson always beats me to stuff because, like, Nick Fury. I'm like, well, there goes that role. I guess, like, but
No,
yeah,
I think you make an excellent superhero. I really do.
think I'd love to be a villain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
Probably
think
more fun.
that'd be a lot. It's a lot more fun to being a villain. But
So are
I'm,
you
I'm
not a villain in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes then?
can neither
Oh,
confirm nor deny any of that. So, but yeah, I'd love to play a villain. I'd love to play a superhero. Like, I love superheroes, and I think that, like, my 5-year-old son just told me today, when I grow up, I want to be a hero and save the world. I'm like, you can do it, son. Anything.
Yeah, oh, that's it. Perfect, Daddy. Perfect answer,
Yeah,
Daddy.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, two quick fire. So you just say which one you prefer, TV or theatre,
Theater.
Supernatural or Dexter.
Mm, I'm gonna say Supernatural.
I'm not jumping up and down or anything, No, I'm quite calmly sitting down. So you won a primetime Emmy. So you're an Emmy Award winner for
Yeah.
your voice over. I knew you've got such a distinctive tone to your voice, so I can see
oh,
why.
It made no
Um,
sense when I was 15, but I've grown into it. But yeah, that happened while I was in grad school, believe it or
so you
not.
enjoy doing that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's
That's awesome.
yeah,
I like doing narrations myself. I love
yeah.
uh, putting yourself into a character's
Mhm.
shoes, and like you say, with your makeup that you were talking about with Orville, because you see yourself in the mirror and it's not you. You
Yeah,
must be able to easily get into that character
like that.
because
As
you
soon as
don't
it's
see
on,
yourself.
as soon as it's on,
Yeah, it's done. Yeah.
that's it. That's it. Put the
Okay. Well, thank you for answering those questions. I think we've
yeah,
got
no problem.
enough time for Wesley to jump back in and ask you about the movie that we can't talk about yet, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So thank you so much, Peter.
Lovely to meet you, Karina.
Well, yeah, we keep circling around this Planet of the Apes thing. You
Yeah.
can't say hero or villain. In the online, the only thing I see is you're an ape, right?
Yep.
So that you can confirm.
I'll say that because there's apes in the movie, and yeah, I'm one of those guys. And the movie takes place generations after Andy Serkis's character Caesar has died, and it's the world is incredible. I think it's going to be it's a beautifully rendered world, specific. And it's motion, it's mocap, so we weren't in prosthetics, we were in motion capture suits, which is happening, Avatar, think about that. Like, I mean, they were all in mocap suits, to create the world. So, it's just amazing how much technology has grown. And the story, I think it's a beautiful story. I'll put it like that.
Well, thank you, Peter Macon, for coming on Flashback. Hope to meet you this weekend. Well, I plan on meeting
For
you this
sure.
weekend because
Yeah.
I'm coming to Hunt Valley, and so are you folks, right?
Yes. See you there.
Hi, this is John Billingsley, Dr. Phlox from Enterprise, and you are listening to Wes Britton's Flashback. I'm the guest.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Flashback. And tonight we're going to go to Star Trek and no doubt some other destinations because our special guest tonight is named John Billingsley, who any Star Trek fan knows well, was Dr. Phlox on 4 seasons of Star Trek Enterprise. But in preparation for this interview, I was delighted to see he's got quite a career. He's got a long resume of appearances on everywhere from Northern Exposure to X-Files to West Wing to Cold Case. And well, who knows? He'll probably tell us about some of that as we go. Oh, yeah, and Intelligence. That was one of my favorite sci-fi shows when that short time it was on. But enough from me. Let's bring John on. Well, hey, John, welcome to Flashback.
Thanks for having me.
Well, one thing I was thinking, I think I asked you this a little bit about shore leave a couple of weeks ago, is that Star Trek has had a long history of docs, starting with Dr. McCoy, of course, and then Gates McFadden, and then, oh goodness,
That bald guy. We'll just brush right over him. That bald holographic guy. Yeah.
Holographic.
Bob Picardo, and I always interrupt people's questions before they get a chance to formulate them because one of my goals is to never give the host an opportunity to actually ask a full question. Bob Picardo famously and notoriously emailed me once to say, "Hey, John, I saw a little poll online that voted me as the most popular Star Trek doctor and you as the least popular Star Trek doctor. Hope you're doing well. Bye, Bob."
Oh, good Lord.
I believe that was a push poll. That was a poll conducted only within his immediate family. But nonetheless, the fact that Bob thought to send it to me or to devise it in the first place gives you insight into his characterological deficiencies. There you go. I love Bob Picardo, as you can perhaps tell, but I do like to make fun of him. Somewhere out in the world today, he is doing a podcast in which he is making fun of me. All right, now back to your question. I'm sorry.
Well, I hadn't even got to it yet.
You got halfway through.
Say, out of all of the doctors in Star Trek history, I suspect you're the one that has to spend the most time in the makeup chair.
Oh, undoubtedly. Although I'm not as much of a student of Star Trek, doubtless, as you are. So perhaps on one of the shows now, there is a doctor who is an alien. Is that not the case? I know that's not true for Discovery. I haven't seen Brave New Worlds. Is the doctor in Brave New Worlds just a regular Joe, like McCoy?
Strange New Worlds. I think he's just a human.
Just a human, okay. Animated show. I'm not sure the doctor on the Orville, I think, is a human. I guess you're right. I'm the only alien doctor.
Well,
And
yeah, the only one
probably
that
the
can
only doctor who carries a bag full of leeches everywhere he goes. That's my favorite thing about Dr. Phlox is Dr. Phlox was an herbalist and believed in leeching people and sucking the blood out with his own mouth if necessary. Then of course the nature of television is such that you have to kind of ultimately rely on that magical tricorder device. He's got cancer. I've cured it. That's the one part I didn't like. I liked the leeching.
Well, did you like having that menagerie? Because your sick bay was full of more animals than
I loved
most zoos.
I loved the concept. Of course, they're not actually real animals.
Oh,
It's a big fat grip hiding behind a cage, waggling a puppet. But I did love the concept that Dr. Phlox spent the better part of his day feeding a variety of beasts that you have to be careful of because they might bite your fingers off. I did love that quite a bit.
Well, tell the folks how you became Dr. Phlox and joined the Star Trek mythology. How did that come about?
Sure. I mean, this is a story that many fans have heard a bajillion times over. So if you're listening and you've heard this before, you can go take a 3-minute refrigerator break and come back. But for those of you who have not heard this story, you audition for all sorts of things as an actor. I had no particular appreciation for Star Trek. I had no feelings for it one way or the other. I didn't know that much about the franchise, but I got an audition for Star Trek Enterprise, the new show. I certainly knew culturally its significance and the fact that if you got that gig, it would last for a while. So it was like, okay, let's really prepare this one. And all they gave you is one scene and a slight instruction. Come in with a slight alien accent, which, needless to say, is rather a daunting direction. It's like a slight alien accent, sort of a Venusian accent or a Saturnian accent, or do I have to go outside the solar system? I practiced with the missus, and we came up with all sorts of wacky voices. And the one that you eventually heard was more or less the voice I used in the audition. But I thought perhaps on his home planet he was a bird, and in moments of rapture or joyous transport, he might squawk, out of exuberance, because the character was written to be an exuberant, optimistic person. So
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, so I auditioned. Blah 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 blah, and lo and behold, I get the part. I go to network, I squawk. I go to the table read, I squawk. But I go through makeup and they don't make me look like a bird. They don't dress me like a bird. Nobody ever encourages me to think like a bird or to talk like a bird. So I don't know if I'm a bird or not. I kept asking Rick and Brandon, it's like, am I a bird? Should I be a bird? And they are notoriously opaque. I love them both, but it's like you can't get a straight answer out of either of them. So they would kind of look at you and go, well, it's like, I have no idea. So that very first time that I was on the set and I had the scene, and they said, let's rehearse, action, blah, 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 blah. And Jim Conway, the director, said, John, quit fucking around, which is how I knew I was not a bird. So I don't know if that's exactly the story you wanted about how I got the part, but that's the story I always tell because.
That's a good one. So why not?
Why not? Yeah. It's actually in television. Usually you jump through a fair number of hoops if you're going to become a series regular. You go in for the creators. Sometimes you go back to the creators. Then you go to the studio that's producing the show. And then sometimes it's a separate audition for the network. Usually there are other people you're up against. It's tense. It's fraught. In this instance, although I did have a network/studio audition at Paramount, I was the only candidate for the gig. That puts a certain kind of pressure on you because if you don't get the job, you must have really fucked it up. But by and large, you alleviate some of the stress. It's like, I'm the only candidate.
Yeah, I was about to say,
yeah, that's happened a couple of times. I think that's probably why I was comfortable squawking in the audition. It's like, oh, they must like me. Okay. I squawked. I'm the only guy here. Dominic was actually in the lobby when I was auditioning, and he tells his version of the story, which is this guy came in and he heard him squawking through the door and he thought, what the hell is that? So, yeah.
And you had to create a whole species basically because there hadn't been any. DeLoreans, I'm about to pronounce that wrong.
Oh no, nobody ever pronounces it right. In fact, when I do my dog and pony show on stage, I can usually make 20 minutes of a bit of just trying to get one fan to pronounce Denobulan correctly. I had no idea it was the most unpronounceable species until well after the fact. I think that's probably why I got the job. I might have been the only person to actually be able to pronounce Denobulan. It's Denobulan. The easy way for me to remember it, or for you to remember it, is to think about, Deno. I don't know. I don't know. No, I don't know. Denobulan. It's the O that seems to elude people. Denobulan. The Bulin also causes certain problems. Something about the diphthongs that seem to elude American speakers. I've lost and forgotten your question. What was it? Oh, creating the species. Yes. Well, of course, I don't write the scripts, so I have nothing really to do with that. I will say that, you sort of invest. Obviously, if you're a Vulcan, you're a Klingon, that work is done for you. You just have to kind of study existing episodes and existing mythology and fit yourself into it. I thought, okay, I don't have anything to go on, so what's my own Bible? And doubtless I'll revise it as they give me stuff. I thought, well, here, you've never heard of Denobulans before.
Nope.
So I thought, okay, what if this is an intensely monastic world in which they don't believe in sex, and there are only 3 or 4 Denobulans left? And the reason I'm out here in the world is because I'm lonely. And it turns out, of course, that in fact we're the fuck
exact opposite.
It's like exact opposite. We all have 18 bajillion spouses. It's teaming. You can't step without stepping on another Denobulan. So it's like, there you go. The actor is never going to be entirely like I'm pointed in the right direction. I think the general sense that I got right away is that this is a character with obviously boundless optimism, but I think more to the point, a certain kind of philosophical detachment. I think he goes on this mission fully expecting not to come back alive. And that's okay. He's lived a long, wonderful life. It's worth it to go out with a sense of adventure and joyfulness. When you consider what the risks were, and he says, sure, I'll go. Weapons may not work. Nobody trusts the transporter. You're the first humans in space. You're frankly, you're all kind of idiots, but I'll go. I kind of love that about him. It's like,
he's a very genial counselor, and like you said, philosopher. That's what I was thinking. He's kind of the ship philosopher when especially sitting there at the dining table, talking with Yoshi or the Vulcan or whatever. You're guidance.
He has a let 100 flowers bloom attitude, and I think a great. I mean, he kind of reminded me, and I think to a certain extent, I maybe even introduced something that might have been a slight Hindi lilt. Because when I thought of him, I thought of the Eastern religions.
I can see that.
I thought that there was a lot of the Buddhist about him.
Yeah.
A lot of the Hindu, believing in a certain kind of cycle of life that gives you a different perspective on the short span we have here. Although they're old, we Denobulans, we live to, I think well into our couple of hundreds. So, theoretically, they could bring old Fat Phlox back on one of the current shows, I think, Back when I was on the Enterprise, I squawked like a bird. Sit down, let me tell you that story here. I can see why they're not bringing me back, actually, the more I talk about it. I've mentioned this to people. My ideal would be just a series called Old Fat Phlox, where Old Fat Phlox is just like sits in a rocking chair at the beginning of each episode. He rocks back and forth. So back when I was in the Enterprise, some interesting things happened, and I'll tell you. And then you get flashback music, and all the young naked actors run around, and then it comes back to me, and I get to say, well, stay tuned next week for another episode of Old Fat Phlox. And they have to pay me a lot of money. I only have to work a quarter of a day. That's surprisingly, they have not warmed.
I've made that offer.
Not
a Star Trek spin-off in the offing.
Yeah, no one ever likes my ideas. My other idea for the show was that there would be an episode in which we pick up an abandoned Denobulan ship, or what seems to be an abandoned Denobulan ship, and it's still got a bunch of Denobulans, who are getting over the trauma. We bring them on board, and they're all like slobs. They leave their underpants lying around. They eat all the food. They shag each other right out in the open, and everybody's like, "Oh, these Denobulans are driving us insane!" And they all look like me. They vetoed that.
That was a script never performed, eh?
Nope, no, an idea. Everybody liked Bob Picardo's ideas. Bob Picardo would waltz in and say, how about I sing opera? How about I sleep with 7 and 9? Everybody said, sure, why not? Bob, you're great. Me, it's like, bar the doors. Here comes Billingsley with another cockamamie idea. Humph.
Well, I was about to ask you about working with the rest of the cast and other Star Trek cast members. How did that go?
It was great. I loved them all. I mean, We don't. I see Dominic and Anthony and Connor quite a bit on the convention circuit. We all like to go to the conventions. It's always a joy to be on stage with them and to go out and grab a dinner afterwards. Unfortunately, we never see Jolene. She's got 3 kids,
Oh,
married, retired, I think, more or less from the business. So she's kind of fallen off our radar screens, and we don't tend to see Scott because obviously Scott as a headliner,
busy.
always
Boy.
busy. And Linda, we see every now and again, although she too also has a child and has a busy career. It's sort of the 4 amigos who kind of spend the most time together, and I love those fellas. But I loved everybody on the show. I mean, it was a nice. It's one of the great joys of Star Trek, is generally speaking, and I think this is in part because the crew for our run of series, that's not true now, but back on Paramount when it was all the Rick and Brannon years, the crew stayed from Next Gen through Deep Space to Voyager to us, so there was such a familial feeling on the set because these people had all spent years together, that the cast really, it wasn't like ever a brutal expectation, but there was an unwritten expectation that we fit in to this pre-existing family, and we not mind our P's and Q's, but that we appreciate what it is to be members of a family. There was no prima donna-ism allowed, and Scott went a long way towards making sure that that was definitely the rule of thumb. He was a wonderful number 1. He reminds me of an actor, Mark Harmon, on NCIS. They both
Yes, yeah.
have marvelous quarterback qualities, team leaders, recognize people's birthdays, made sure they introduced themselves to all the extras, treated everybody with great respect and affection. They were real models for all of us.
You have any favorite episodes from the 4-year run? I'm guessing
Different,
those that featured
different
your
episodes.
character.
Yeah, different episodes for different reasons. Probably the most fun I had was an episode called "The Night in Sick Bay," which is one. It gave me a lot of time to act with Scott and to get to hang out with Scott, who I love. It also was an episode that kind of gave us a lot more insight into the Denobulan character. That was when you find out I have multiple wives. You found out about a bit of his medical history, his estrangement from his son. That was probably the most replete with background info for me. And I thought it was kind of a lovely episode in terms of having a bit of a screwball sense of humor. Not always necessarily a fan's favorite episode, because I think there was a sense that perhaps the captain was portrayed as a bit of a boob. And I think people kind of didn't like that. I didn't think that to be true, but I understand people's sensibilities. There was an episode called Similitude, when we clone Trip, which I thought was quite affecting, and I thought had a certain amount of the qualities of Star Trek, when I think Star Trek really works, when it is both tense, emotionally involving, and deals with a scientific or a social issue and kind of takes it apart and analyzes it from different perspectives. Some episodes do one of those 3 things or 2 of those 3 things. I thought that episode did all of those things in a way that made it very compelling. The episode when we see that this was just as a perspective, I wasn't much in it, but the episode when we see that we failed to catch the Xindi, and the universe has been annihilated, and Scott has Alzheimer's in essence, and we are sort of reliving this over and over and over again to get to the point where we can rectify it. I thought that was kind of a lovely episode.
What about Dear Doctor?
Yes, I mean, Dear Doctor was the first episode that I had a chance to really kind of have the stage to myself, more or less. So yes, I did quite enjoy that. I would take exception with the Doctor's decision at the end of that episode, and it is a controversial episode for that reason. I mean, in essence, you could argue that he performs an act of genocide. He chooses to not keep a species alive when he has the medical capacity to do it. He makes a sociological decision that it would be better to allow the planet to take its own course, and for the so-called inferior species to come to a prominence it would not otherwise have. A debatable ethical decision, and interesting conversation. I just don't know that I believe that Dr. Phlox did the right thing there. So that's so I don't tend to include that.
It sounds like a Star Trek NG. All these debates about the Prime Directive.
Yes, and that was the episode in which we introduced, which felt so smidge ham-handed. I thought we actually introduced the Prime Directive. The captain is, if only we had some kind of directive. It's like, well, that's a little on the nose. All right.
Because every Star Trek fan would know what he was talking about
Oh,
instantaneously.
Yeah. No, it felt maybe a little smidge obvious, but Having said that, I did enjoy that episode. I also enjoyed the episode where I got to wander around the ship without any clothes on. When I had the whole ship to myself, I think I saved the day. I can't remember what that one was called. It was a third season episode. We go through some space expanse. All human beings have to be knocked out, and only the Denobulan can run. Is going to be impervious. Turns out it actually fucks my brain up, so I still have these psychotic almost moments of breakdown. That was kind of a fun episode to do, but mostly I got to walk around the ship naked. I suggested that I should walk through into sick bay, turn sharply to the left, and all the way across the room, a flower pot would crash to the ground.
Sounds like a Douglas Adams moment.
Think about that for a moment. They decided that would not be appropriate.
I was surprised researching this interview that there were fans who thought you kind of reminded them of Neelix.
Oh, I get that all the time. I get all us fat middle-aged character actor aliens, look alike. Believe me. No, people come up to me all the time and said, "I loved you as Neelix. Oh, Neelix, you were great as Neelix." And it's like, I'm a Denobulan. I didn't wear a carpet. I didn't have. I don't know what species he was, but
I've forgotten.
Yeah, no, I know we get confused for each other frequently. Actually, back in the day when we would be at a convention together, and Ethan would come up on stage, and when I was younger and more limber, I'd run through the audience and jump up on stage and say, "I'm the real Neelix." And put him aside. So presumably somewhere somebody's confusing him with Dr. Phlox too. So
I get the impression you really enjoy yourself at conventions. You must like the fans.
I love the fans. I love the conventions. And, although I wasn't necessarily a huge Star Trek aficionado, I mean, I'd watched the original series when it was on, but I'd been traveling and doing theater and, had a busy life during the years when all the other iterations of Star Trek that preceded me were on. So when I got the show, I didn't necessarily have an aesthetic appreciation for Star Trek, but I certainly had a keen awareness of what its sociological significance was. And as an actor, I was very cognizant of the fact that this was going to be a strange and interesting ride, and in a way, a gravy train. And indeed, it has proved to be. I mean, I get to travel the world on the company dime with my wife on my arm, performing low vaudeville acts for appreciative audiences. It's a joy. I told my wife early on, it's like, honey, I can walk into any bar in the world, and if I just say loudly enough, "Back when I was on Star Trek," somebody will buy me a drink.
Yeah.
Like, what a gift. What a gift. Now, I have the sensibility that appreciates that. I like nothing more than to hang out with strangers in a bar. So, if you're not the right temperament, this would not necessarily be the greatest gift in the world. There are certainly actors you kind of feel like, I don't know why you went into his business if you hate to be recognized. I'm the opposite of that. I wouldn't want paparazzi stalking me all the time. And I get the idea that if you were, Paul Newman, and you walked out of the house and somebody was throwing their panties at you, that might get tiresome. I have not experienced that myself. I would have to wait and see. I don't think that would get that tiresome. As the guy who wore the rubber head, I will say that the end of 4 years, it was not an unmixed blessing. I mean, for me, it was like, oh, what a shame the show is ending, like in Mission Impossible. Oops, I won't be wearing this again. So.
All right. Well, I was thinking a question about all these other things you've done, because you've had a really impressive career.
I've been around.
If I don't let Karina in, she'll kill me.
Oh, I doubt that, but welcome, Karina.
Go for Greece, she'll put a hex on me.
Right, now, Karina, there you go. Here we go. Okay, Karina, right, you are in.
I'm not a witch, okay? I cannot hex people or curse people. Maybe in my head, but no. Thank you so much, Wesley, for inviting me. Hello, John. Nice to meet you.
Dear. Nice to be met.
So the first thing I have to say to you is Pakari titem prasa.
Brika muskalupa chica.
Ditaronta sarabet.
Barchica baka.
For questa esse.
Bitch gabu.
How did I do?
How did I do?
You sounded right. Yeah, I mean, I have no idea how you answered me, but
I don't either. I don't either. I have to say, when we got scripts and it kind of like had us speaking in alien languages, they were very precise. They would spell out the words phonetically. They would give you the accents. It was like there was a big part of it. It's like, this is all made up. Why don't we just let the actor just go brega fuka fuka instead of like, it's like I gotta memorize what
you had
written.
a whole language. You had a whole language.
Well, all these different languages, but some of the languages I get Klingon is actually like now a language. But when they come up with a fake alien and this species never existed, then it was just, no, this is not a language. This is just gobbledygook, and you're just wanting me to get it, the way you want it. Fortunately, I did not have Linda's role. Of all the roles, it's like, thank God I do not have to memorize a bunch of random syllables.
Oh, just so you know, Wesley, and everyone who's listening, I actually said to him in Denobulan.
You can't even say the species. This is I can get 10 minutes out of this on a Deno. Say Deno. Say Bulan. Say Bulan. No, Bulan.
Okay. I said their condition is grave, but they're resting for now. And then I said, I'm impressed.
Fabulous. And
I have no idea what he said back to me because I don't speak.
I said, you don't want to know. They were tender. They were tender endearments. It's a good. Let's just keep it between us.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
If I ever meet you in person, I'm going to insist that you learn how to say Denobulan correctly. But I'll let it go
Denobulan.
for now. No, Denobulan.
Denobulan.
No.
Right.
No.
I have some fan questions for you.
Moving
okay.
On.
This came from the Star Trek Enterprise fan page on Facebook.
Yeah.
We have Maggie who said you were the best Doctor ever on any of Star Trek. You as Dr. Phlox, exactly, sensitive, caring, supportive of the captain when times were tough. And her question is, how long did it take you to become Dr. Phlox, I'm going to say instead, in makeup?
Because the word Denobulan was on the page.
Yeah.
How long did it take? How long did it take for the makeup to be applied?
Yeah.
Anywhere between 2.5 and 3 hours. They whittled it
quick
down.
at it then.
And that includes the hair. You spend more time in a piece that they put a skull cap on, and there's a piece that attaches. It's a lot of gluing. Not so much, but there is a ton of uncomfortable prosthetics. I mean, I think they learned to a certain extent from previous experience, like with the Ferengi. I mean, not that those species aren't great, but when you have a mouth prosthetic or a lot of stuff on your head, it can be uncomfortable. So for a series regular to have to kind of be covered in latex and to have to go through a makeup application that is too long.
Yeah.
One, it becomes pricey because you're now paying a lot more overtime. You have to bring the actor in really early. You have to keep the actor really late. I think they wanted with me, I'm just speculating, they wanted to try and find a balance that allowed them to not have to put me through hell and to run up their costs.
Put a mask on you and be done with.
Yeah, I just think at some point it's like they should from the planet Clownius Atticus, and they should just have a little red rubber nose, and just this little bozo.
Okay.
5 minutes in the chair.
Courtney says that you're her favorite Doctor, and she would like to know what would make you return to the Trekkie universe.
It's not. I mean, it's not like I'm turning offers down. I mean, they're not coming in. I was happy to guest star on the Orville. If any of the shows wanted me to return, either as a Denobulan or in some other guise, I'd happily consider it. Obviously, the small matter of a paycheck would come into play.
She said the world would be a better place if we had more Phlox in our lives.
Oh, well, ain't that sweet? I gotta tell you, I was always, this I talk about quite a bit because my actual career, if I were to go, from day one to today, Phlox was not necessarily anomalous, but Phlox was to me exceptional because he was a character who was really much closer to my own temperament and personality.
John, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us.
Well, thanks, John, for coming by our little radio show.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget that all past shows are archived on the Artist First Radio us next week for another exciting episode of Flashback.